Welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, this one looks fascinating.
These Wild Ascent rulebooks, excerpts from both Arena mode and Hunt mode, you've really piqued our curiosity.
Yeah.
It's a whole world of gladiators and mythical creatures.
Yeah.
Today, we'll unpack the lore, the gameplay, and what makes this game so unique.
Sounds like fun.
Get ready for some surprises.
What's immediately fascinating to me is how Wild Ascent blends competition and cooperation.
Right.
These two modes of play, Arena and Hunt, suggest very different experiences within the same rich world.
Okay, so let's start with the lore.
Yeah.
The Sylvestrum, this sprawling gladiatorial arena, it didn't start out grand, you know.
Humble beginnings.
Exactly. Imagine a humble farming village called Proach, where Amyrtis, a survivor of some elven plague, decides to build an arena. Early days, just local farmers.
More for laughs than blood sport, huh?
Exactly. But, and here's a classic, build it and they will come. Story. Skilled warriors start showing up, wanting in on the action.
Ah, so the competition heats up. And that's where the economics of the game world come into play, right?
Absolutely.
This influx of talent attracted merchants, artisans, the whole shebang. Proach transformed into a bustling city, all thanks to the Sylvestrum's allure.
But the real game changer. Ascents.
Okay, tell me about these Ascents.
These are legendary heroes who can actually summon and command creatures from the wilds.
From the wild?
From the wilds.
Okay.
A mystical realm teeming with, well, you guessed it, creatures.
All right, I'm hooked.
Picture this. A warrior strides into the arena, a phoenix soaring overhead.
Wow.
Instant rock star status.
It's a brilliant blend of mythology and spectacle.
It is.
These early arena days focused on non-lethal combat between Ascents and their bonded creatures.
Right.
It's almost like an ancient, more brutal form of Pokemon, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. But eventually, the crowds wanted more.
Oh, I see. The stakes are rising.
Ticket sales dipped, and Amyrtis needed to up the ante.
Had to innovate.
This is where his daughter, Veria, enters the picture. And let me tell you, she wasn't content with just selling out the arena.
So, even more ambitious than her father.
Clea wasn't just power-hungry, she was cunning.
Oh.
She didn't just seize control of the Sylvestrum in a coup.
No.
She imprisoned the Gladiators, transforming the arena from a spectacle into a fight for survival.
Ruthless.
Now, we know Clea wanted to conquer the kingdom.
Of course, typical.
To do that, she needed an army.
Naturally.
Enter Candor,
Who is Candor?
leader of a band of brigands.
Okay, so basically, your classic rogues operating on the fringes of society.
More precisely,
Got it.
Clea gave him a task. Replenish the Sylvestrum's ranks.
Replenish, you mean find more gladiator.
Exactly. Thus, the Seekers were born.
Interesting.
And Candor, ever the pragmatist, created a brutal code of conduct for his Seekers.
Oh, this should be good.
They were bound by a magical tattoo. Think of it as a living ledger etched onto their skin, tracking their every capture, human or beast.
Wow, that's intense.
So early on, these Seekers were straight-up bad guys, kidnapping folks and selling them into this gladiatorial meat grinder.
They were just following orders, really, weren't they?
Wow.
But I guess it gets a bit more morally gray when they're taking creatures from the wilds instead of people.
Yeah, so Clea yearned for more than just human fighters.
The creatures, right?
She craved the creatures of the wilds for her arena.
Naturally.
So Candor shifted his focus, leading expeditions into the wilds to capture these beasts.
High stakes.
It was dangerous, high-stakes work. But those who returned with cages full of monstrous creatures were handsomely rewarded. And over time, these wilds expeditions became the primary source of new gladiators.
I see.
A twisted ecosystem where Seekers, born from brutality, are driven by greed, but also this glimmer of hope for freedom.
Wow, what a moral dilemma.
They're trapped in a cycle of violence.
And here's where the game's morality gets really interesting.
Right.
These Seekers, products of a brutal system, are fighting to escape that very system.
It makes you think.
It makes you question, are their actions justified? Can they ever truly be free of their past?
That's a question we'll keep coming back to as we dive deeper into the gameplay.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned two modes of play.
Yeah.
Arena mode and Hunt mode. Can you give us a taste of what each offers?
Arena mode is where the gladiatorial combat really shines.
Okay.
It's a competitive mode, either 2 or 4 players,
Right.
with each player or team building their own troop of gladiators.
Cool.
You get to handpick your Assent, their creatures, their skills, even their gear.
So like drafting a fantasy sports team, but with swords, sorcery, and a whole lot more blood?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Now, while deathmatch lasts Ascent standing wins might appeal to some.
Sure.
I think the last man standing objective, where you have to eliminate the entire enemy troop, offers a greater strategic challenge.
Yeah, I can see that.
I imagine those battles are intense, a whirlwind of tactical maneuvers and all-out brawls, creatures clashing against each other in a chaotic frenzy.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
Arena mode emphasizes strategic team composition and quick thinking.
Right.
But that's just one side of Wild Ascent. Hunt mode offers a completely different experience.
All right, tell me about it.
Think of it as a cooperative campaign for 1 to 4 players, where you step into the shoes of those seekers, venturing into the wilds to hunt, capture, and ultimately profit from those mythical creatures.
So it's not just about hacking and slashing. There's an element of planning and preparation involved.
Absolutely.
This reminds me of that time I tried to trap a squirrel in my backyard.
How'd that go?
Let's just say it didn't go as planned.
I can imagine.
But yeah, so you're managing risk and reward with each expedition.
Right.
Choosing which creatures to target, how to capture them without getting yourself killed, and how to invest your hard-earned gold to improve your chances of survival.
And the encampment then becomes your lifeline in hunt mode.
It does.
It's where you regroup, strategize, and prepare for the next encounter. Sort of like building a base in a survival game, but tailored for hunting monsters. It's where you manage your resources, research new technologies, and upgrade your buildings to unlock powerful new skills for your seekers.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground already, from the origins of the Sylvestrum to the moral complexities of those seekers.
We have.
But what about the actual gameplay itself? How does Wild Ascent handle the nuts and bolts of combat and those unique creature abilities?
Well, both modes share some key elements.
Yeah.
Gladiators and Seekers, for instance, have core attributes that determine their effectiveness in combat.
Oh, okay.
Strength, agility, magical prowess, and so on.
So a hulking warrior with a giant axe would have different stats compared to, say, a nimble rogue wielding daggers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Arena mode also introduces momentum dice, adding another layer of strategy.
Interesting.
Imagine being able to boost your warrior's attack power or give your rogue a burst of speed at a crucial moment.
Yeah,
It can really turn the tide of battle.
I bet. The variety of creatures sounds amazing.
It is.
I'm particularly interested in how the Streamcaller's elemental control plays out in combat.
Yeah, we'll get to him.
But let's talk about the stars of the show. Those creatures.
Okay.
I'm hoping for some epic mythical monsters.
You won't be disappointed.
Okay, good.
The wilds are teeming with all sorts of fascinating creatures, each with unique threat levels, skills, and behaviors.
Right.
We've got classic griffins, lumbering horn golems, and even those mystical stream callers you mentioned.
But capturing these creatures in hunt mode can't be easy, right?
Not at all. You've got to weaken a creature without killing it, all while avoiding their potentially deadly attacks.
Yeah.
It requires strategy, coordination with your fellow seekers, and effective use of skills to bring those beasts down, or at least subdue them.
And I'm guessing a captured creature is worth a pretty penny back at the Sylvestrum's markets.
You bet. Capturing creatures is a key source of income in hunt mode.
Right.
The rarer and more dangerous the beast, the more gold you'll earn, allowing you to invest further in your encampment and prepare for even tougher challenges.
Makes sense.
Right. So, it sounds like hunt mode really emphasizes that strategic layer.
Yeah.
The long game of building up your encampment and preparing for those high-stakes encounters.
It really does.
And that's where resource management becomes crucial.
Okay.
You're constantly balancing short-term gains with long-term investment.
Right.
Do you sell that captured griffin for a quick influx of gold?
I'd be tempted.
Or do you hold on to it, train it, and potentially use it in future hunts?
Ooh, tough choices. And speaking of griffins,
Yeah.
let's dive into those creatures a bit more.
Let's.
You mentioned they have unique skills and behaviors.
They do.
What makes a griffin such a formidable opponent?
Well, as you might imagine, griffins are known for their aerial assault.
Of course they can fly.
Their ability to swoop down from above, talons bared, can really disrupt enemy formations.
I bet.
In arena mode, a well-timed griffin attack can decimate an opponent's weaker creatures,
Yeah.
creating an opening for your heavier hitters.
Yeah.
But capturing a griffin in the wilds must be a completely different challenge.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine it's easy to ground one of those majestic beasts. In hunt mode, you'd need to think strategically.
Okay.
Perhaps lure it into a dense forest where its flight is hampered? Or use traps and nets to bring it down?
Yeah.
And don't forget, you'll need to weaken it enough to capture it, all while avoiding those razor-sharp talons.
Talk about a high-risk, high reward scenario.
That's hunt mode for you.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Seekers can unlock new skills by upgrading their encampment.
They can.
What kind of skills are we talking about here?
There's a whole range of skills that can enhance your Seeker's abilities.
Oh, cool.
For instance, you might invest in improved trapping techniques,
Okay.
making it easier to capture those elusive creatures.
Makes sense.
Or perhaps you focus on combat skills, giving your Seekers an edge in those dangerous encounters.
So there's a real sense of specialization within hunt mode. You could have Seekers who excel at tracking, others who are masters of traps, and still others who are frontline fighters.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And the choices you make when upgrading your encampment will directly impact your team's effectiveness in the wilds.
It adds a layer of strategic depth that goes beyond just combat prowess.
It does.
This is all starting to sound incredibly complex.
A bit, yeah?
And we haven't even touched on the other creatures you mentioned, like those horned golems and stream callers.
Oh, we've just scratched the surface.
Really?
The wilds are teeming with a diverse range of creatures, each with its own unique challenges and rewards.
Okay.
For instance, those horned golems, with their incredible resilience, can be absolute tanks in arena mode.
So, like, super tough.
Yeah, they can soak up damage and disrupt enemy lines,
Right.
creating openings for your more agile attackers.
Interesting.
But I imagine their strength also makes them incredibly difficult to capture in the wilds.
I bet.
What kind of strategies would you need to employ to bring down a horned golem?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, brute force alone won't do the trick.
Okay.
You might need to exploit their weaknesses.
Like what?
Perhaps targeting their legs to slow them down?
Ah, okay.
Or using elemental attacks to chip away at their defenses?
And, of course, coordination with your fellow Seekers is key.
Of course.
You might need to distract the golem while others set traps or prepare a decisive blow.
Now, what about those stream callers?
Oh yeah, those sound cool.
You mentioned they have control over the elements.
They do.
How does that play out in the game?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Imagine a creature that can summon torrential rain to drench your opponents, or call forth bolts of lightning to strike from the sky.
Wow, that does sound powerful.
In arena mode, a streamcaller can control the flow of battle, turning the environment itself into a weapon.
That's so cool. I can only imagine the strategic possibilities.
It's pretty incredible.
But in hunt mode, wouldn't a streamcaller's elemental control make them incredibly dangerous to approach, let alone capture?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You'd need to be extremely cautious.
Right.
Perhaps you could try to lure them into an area where their elemental powers are less effective.
Like a desert.
Exactly.
Sorry?
Or use your own knowledge of the elements to counter their attacks.
So it sounds like capturing a streamcaller would require a deep understanding of its abilities
Yeah,
and the environment itself.
precisely.
Oh,
And that's what makes hunt mode so engaging.
okay.
You're not just battling creatures, you're battling the elements, the terrain, and your own strategic limitations.
It sounds like a real challenge.
It is.
We've talked a lot about the creatures and their unique skills, but what about those momentum dice you mentioned earlier?
Oh, right.
How do they actually work in arena mode?
Think of them as a way to inject a bit of chance and excitement into the battles.
Okay.
Each player starts with a certain number of momentum dice,
Right.
and they can use them at strategic points during the match.
I see.
Let's say your warrior is facing off against a particularly tough horned golem.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You might decide to use a momentum die to trigger a crippling blow ability.
So you're essentially gambling on a powerful effect
Right.
that could swing the momentum in your favor.
But what if the die roll doesn't go your way?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
There's always a risk involved.
I see.
Some abilities might have negative consequences if you roll poorly.
Oh, so it's a double-edged sword.
It is. It's all about weighing the potential rewards against the risks.
So momentum dice add a layer of unpredictability to the battles,
They do.
forcing players to think on their feet and adapt to changing circumstances.
Exactly.
But let's go back to the hunt mode for a moment.
Sure.
You mentioned that the encampment is crucial for upgrading your Seekers and preparing for expeditions.
It is.
Can you give us a little more detail on how that works?
Certainly, the encampment acts as your central hub in hunt mode.
Okay.
Think of it as a small village that grows and evolves as you progress through the game.
Cool.
You start with basic structures, but as you gather resources and gold, you can build new facilities and upgrade existing ones.
So it's like a base building element within the larger game.
It is.
What kind of facilities are we talking about here?
Well, you'll need a place to train your Seekers,
Okay.
a workshop for crafting equipment, And a marketplace for trading goods.
Right, the basics.
You might also want to invest in a research lab to unlock new technologies.
Oh, interesting.
Or a hospital to heal your wounded seekers.
Smart.
So there's a lot of strategic choices involved in building up your encampment.
Yeah, there are.
Do you prioritize offense, defense, or a balanced approach?
It sounds like your choices will depend on your play style and the challenges you're facing.
They will.
Perhaps you focus on upgrading your training facilities to create a team of elite seekers.
Right.
Or maybe you invest in defenses to protect your encampment from raids by rival factions.
Rival factions.
Yeah.
That adds a whole other layer of complexity to the game.
It does, doesn't it?
The wilds are a dangerous place. And you're not the only one seeking to exploit its resources.
Of course not.
You might encounter other seekers,
Okay.
bands of brigands, or even creatures that threaten your encampment.
So there's an element of base defense as well.
There is.
Wow.
And it's just another example of how Wild Ascent blends strategic gameplay with those captivating creature encounters.
Now, we talked earlier about the moral complexities of the Seekers.
We did.
They're products of a brutal system, yet they're striving for freedom.
They are.
Do you think their actions in the wilds, capturing creatures for the arena, can ever truly be justified?
You say they are products of a brutal system.
Well, they are, aren't they?
But aren't they perpetuating that cycle of violence by capturing creatures for the very arena they're trying to escape?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And I think it speaks to the moral gray areas that Wild Ascent explores.
Definitely.
It's not a game with clear-cut heroes and villains.
Right.
It asks players to confront those uncomfortable truths and make their own judgments.
And that's what makes it so compelling.
Right.
It's a game that makes you think not just about strategy and tactics, but about the consequences of your actions.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
Mm-hmm.
from the lore and history of the Sylvestrum to the intricacies of combat and creature capture.
Wow, it's been a lot.
But there's one element we haven't explored yet: the arenas themselves.
Oh, right.
What kind of environments are we battling in?
Yes. The environment play a significant role in both game modes.
I bet.
We're not just talking about flat, open battlefields.
Yeah.
There are obstacles and terrain features that can be used strategically.
So we might see things like dense forests,
Oh, yeah.
rocky canyons,
Definitely.
or maybe even those crumbling ruins of ancient civilizations.
Exactly. And within those environments, you have things like partial cover,
Oh, okay.
which can provide a defensive bonus,
Makes sense.
or full cover,
Yeah.
which can completely block line of sight.
Right.
And then you have hazards like spinning blades, which can be a threat to both gladiators and creatures.
So you're saying these hazards are indiscriminate.
They are. Watch out.
It sounds like those environmental elements could really shake things up,
They can.
forcing players to think on their feet and adapt their strategies.
Precisely. In Wild Ascent, you're not just battling your opponents, you're battling the environment itself.
Makes sense.
It adds a whole new layer of challenge and unpredictability to the gameplay.
Now, one thing that really stood out to me in these rulebooks was the Wildwood Sentinel.
Oh, yeah, the Wildwood Sentinel.
It's described as a creature deeply connected to the forest,
That's right.
and it can summon these smaller plant-like creatures called skirmishers.
They're pretty cool.
What's the strategic advantage of having a creature that can summon allies like that?
Well, in arena mode, imagine you're facing a heavily armored opponent.
Okay.
A direct assault might prove difficult,
Yeah, I can see that.
but with the Wildwood Sentinel,
Yeah.
you can summon a wave of skirmishers to overwhelm your opponent.
So just swarm them.
Exactly.
Smart.
They might not be individually powerful,
Okay.
but their sheer numbers can wear down even the toughest defenses.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic tactic of using smaller, more agile units to distract and harass a larger opponent,
Right.
creating an opening for a decisive strike.
Exactly.
And in hunt mode, the Wildwood Sentinel's ability to summon skirmishers can be invaluable for protecting your encampment.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine a pack of predators trying to breach your defenses.
Yeah.
A well-placed Wildwood Sentinel can summon a swarm of skirmishers to hold them off while your seekers prepare a counterattack.
Yeah, it's a great defensive strategy.
It sounds like the Wildwood Sentinel is a versatile creature,
It is.
effective in both offensive and defensive situations.
Yeah,
I'm starting to see why creature selection is so important in Wild Ascent.
it is.
And the Wildwood Sentinel is just one example.
One of many.
There are dozens of other creatures, each with its own unique skills and tactical applications. It's up to you, the player, to discover their strengths and weaknesses and to use them strategically to achieve your goals.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive into the world of Wild Ascent has been a wild ride.
It is.
From the rise and fall of the Sylvestrum to the moral complexities of the Seekers, this game has it all.
I know, right? It's a world rich in lore, with a gameplay system that seems to offer both tactical depth and exciting challenges.
And whether you're drawn to the competitive thrill of arena mode or the cooperative campaign of hunt mode,
Yeah,
there's something here for everyone.
definitely.
So what does this all mean for you? If you're looking for a game that blends strategic combat, resource management, and thought-provoking storytelling,
Yeah.
Wild Ascent might just be the ticket.
And if you're intrigued by the moral quandaries presented by the Seekers,
Right.
their quest for freedom amidst a world of violence,
Yeah.
then I encourage you to delve deeper into the game's lore. Consider this.
Okay.
Can the Seekers, through their actions in the wilds, atone for their role in Vericlea's rise to power?
That's a really good question. This is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. There's a whole bestiary of creatures to discover, strategies to master, and stories waiting to be told in the world of Wild Ascent. Are you ready to join the hunt?
The choice, as always, is yours. But be warned. Once you step into the wilds, there's no turning back.